us open the scripture together to Mark chapter 10. And we're going to be reading verses 13 to 16, and then also a quick passage from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. People were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hand on them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. And then in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, "Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up." Let us pray. So Lord, we thank you for these your holy words. And we thank you for the movement of your Spirit in this place. God, we know that you're doing something new. And so as we sung today, help us, God, to be those vessels that are willing to be pressed so that new wine may come forth and people may experience new life in you. We love you, Jesus, and we give you thanks. Amen. Amen. I know some of you have heard this story before. I told it a couple different variations of it, or little snippets of it, but one of the things that the transition I went from being in Moscow, Russia to Melbourne is just a different ministry setting. I was involved with a very director of a very large ministry that provided aid for people. We actually had to coordinate over 2,000 volunteers a year that would come through to serve over 4,000 individuals plus an extension ministry. And people wonder, like, wow, how can a small church, and it was a small church, do such amazing things that have such a global impact? And when people hear this story, I was meeting with a minister today, they're like, how did this happen? Well, how did it happen was, back in the early 90s, there was a man from Africa that was a severe diabetic, and he needed to get some help. And so when people called for help with him, and they called what is the equivalent of our 911 services to help this person, the medics came, and when they saw that the man had black skin, they said they weren't going to treat him. And the man died of a diabetic coma that same day. And because of that, Christians in the area said something needs to be done. We need to change something. We need to do something different. And sometimes it takes, brokenness or just a bad experience to wake up the church in different parts of the world. We've been going through this journey trying to rediscover God's story. And what does it mean for Emmanuel? That's been the overall theme of this sermon series, to try to cast some vision for us. And the reason why is because if we don't have a vision and we don't have some type of a plan, or at least God's vision for us of where we are going, we're just going to go in circles. And we're going to be doing the same thing month after month, year after year. And then what happens with churches that go into the cycle is that eventually, as the wheel keeps going around, you remember when you were a kid and you're on those merry-go-rounds? Do you remember those? I think they call them merry-go-rounds here in the States. I used to love these when I was a little kid, and we would run real hard, and then we'd jump on it and do it. And then there was always that person that was spinning it around and spinning it around and spinning it around. And then finally they got it so fast where kids started flying off with it. That's just how it was. And it wasn't these cool, sophisticated plastic merry-go-round things that we have today. But these were metal ones with rust. When you flew off, you didn't fall into a bed of rubber that bounces you and pushes you. You fell into mulch that got into your skin. But that's what happens to us as a church. When we just keep going around, people just start flying off, people get hurt, and we don't accomplish God's kingdom mission. So we're trying to get a vision. If you remember, we talked about what is this story and why is it important for us. We said that, this story must be told. And we started talking about that dirty word in the church called evangelism, that we cannot be afraid of it, even though people have abused that word and abused that practice in many ways. It's still part of the church's mission to tell people about Jesus Christ because we have good news. Another thing we talked about was that this story must be known. In other words, you cannot just come into God's story and understand and comprehend it by just listening to sermons and singing songs. That's one part of it, but we have to go deeper. And we have to go deeper by following the practices of the early church where they started meeting from house to house. They met in the temple. They shared lives together. They got into the scriptures, and they became disciples. They ordered their lives after a pattern of following Jesus. Then we also had a reminder that, we are part of the story. That God's Spirit is upon each and every one of us. God has anointed us so that we can go forth and bring this good news and announce God's justice and mercy so that people who are suffering can experience new life. And now we're at this last part of the thing I want to highlight, and I just want to just preface it with this, that the things that I'm lifting up about evangelism, discipleship, mercy ministries, and this next part that I want to talk about, this is not some kind of cool church growth thing, okay? Believe me, I've been cleaning out my office, and you don't have any curriculums and Florida Conference Bishop ideas I have thrown away this past week that were sitting in my office. This church has faithfully done every plan that has come down the pipeline to say that this will change your church. And I'm not trying to pitch to you some kind of another, scheme, because we don't need schemes. What we need is to find out what the Spirit of God is doing, what the Spirit of God has been leading the church throughout the centuries, and get on board with it. So I want to ask you this question. If we were to rate Emmanuel, this church right now, on a scale from 1 to 10 about how we are doing children's ministry, children and youth ministries. And when we're rating this, I'm talking about how do we allocate our budget? Like, what does our budget look like to reflect that children are our main priority? What does our facility tell that children are our main priority? Does our personnel, our staffing, our volunteers, does that reflect that children are our main priority? I want you to be honest, okay? On a scale from 1 to 10, which 1 means that, we are doing a very poor job. We're not really even doing nothing. We're not a blip on the radar. To 10, where we are just going gangbusters and saying, we believe that we are called to be an inclusive church, and that means that we minister to every generation. Every generation matters in the kingdom of God. Where are we?
0.
Wait, go ahead and shout it out again, a couple of them.
0.
I heard 0. Wow, you guys are getting bold here. Okay, I heard 0. I heard 1. I heard a 3. Okay, these are great things. Because here's one thing I want us to remember, though. While many of you have admitted that man, we have a long way to go. We have some growth to do. One thing I know about this church is that you do care about children. When there is an opportunity to do something in the lives of kids, I'm telling you what, and it's tangible and it's something real and thought through, this church steps up. What I want to cast today is, now let's make it part of our vision. Let us make it part of our way. That, that this story must continue. And how it continues is by ministering to the kids today. That's the crux of this service. So if you don't want anything to do about children, walk out. Okay? Because this is the direction that we are going. Jesus, he challenged the Near East perception of the value of children in the passage that we read about in Mark. And the reason why is because, in that time, children were more valued as a utility. Now I'm talking about in the Greco-Roman world, I'm talking about in the Hebrew world, you have this blend of cultures. Children were more valued by what they could do for the family. In other words, if you wanted to be a prosperous person, you had a lot of kids because then there'd be a lot of workers. Try doing that today, it will not work. But anyways, in those days, that was the value. And so kids were kind of viewed as something that you keep on the peripheral part of your life. You remember that old saying, children are to be seen and not heard. Well, we see in Jesus' disciples, and if you look at Mark and then later on if you look at Matthew, these same passages, what you can see leading up to all of this is that Jesus was doing ministry with children. But it was always coming in the form of like a mercy ministry. If a child needed to be raised from the dead, Jesus would do this. If a child was sick, Jesus would heal them. And we see this tradition also, very prominent in the Old Testament. For example, like, when Elijah would pray for the widow's son. You'd see these things. But Jesus pushes the societal norms, and here in Mark, in a way that some of us miss it if we're not careful. Because how we miss it is we jump to the part of, well, I have to have childlike faith. We always talk about that. But let's not forget what was actually happening there. Families, parents were bringing their children to Jesus so that he could bless them, so that he could touch them. That was the context, okay? It wasn't that these were sick kids. These weren't kids that had need that we could see physically. The parents said, you know what? I want my kids to experience Jesus. And the disciples rebuked them. The disciples said no. They pushed them away. They created barriers. And we see here in Mark where Jesus gets mad, indignant. He was not happy about this. And Jesus said, let the little children come to me. Don't put up barriers. Let them come. Now, I know that we live in a modern age and there's all these liabilities with dealing with children. I get it. But here's the thing, church. You know what? We always pay our insurance premiums, okay? We always do what we're supposed to do. And these insurance premiums are there so that we can do ministry. And the question I want to ask ourselves is, why are we in that 0, 1, or 3 category? Are we maybe like those disciples that are creating barriers for children to enter into life with God by not offering any kind of a meaningful ministry or program for them? And when I say meaning, I got to be very careful about this because we have some people that are very, very dedicated to children's ministry. And they miss a lot of worship services so that the kids that we have, and we do have a spectrum of kids right now that touches almost all the large spectrum of kids, but they do this week after week because they say, you know what, we can't leave the kids behind. And I thank God for those individuals, but church, maybe we've created some barriers. Maybe we have created some obstacles. You see, when I told you that story about those people in Russia that turned away medical care for a person with diabetes because of the color of their skin, those people there, I don't think they were bad people, but I think they had a bad vision of what society is supposed to look like. And I think sometimes in churches, it's easy for us to get a bad vision or to get our eye off the ball and start looking at other things and challenging ourselves and say, okay, we got to be occupied for this. And it's easy to just go off track. So I don't think we are bad, but what I think is that we need to revisit some things. We need to wake up to some things. Can I ask you a question? Has the name Mordecai Ham ever ring a bell to anybody? Raise your hand if you ever heard of Mordecai Ham. Have you ever heard of him? Okay, well, let me wind back the story just a little bit. So those who follow the life of Billy Graham, Mordecai Ham is like this really big figure. And the reason why is because this is the person that had a big camp meeting outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Billy Graham went when he was about 15, 16 years old, and he gave his life to Jesus. That's that defining mark where Billy Graham said, "Hey, this is the moment." And so many people think, they're like, "Wow, Mordecai Ham is this person that is important." Well, then other historians that study the life of Billy Graham realize that, it wasn't Mordecai Ham's doing, really. There was another person that was involved, and that was the person by Albert McCain. Who was Albert McCain? He was the one that invited Billy Graham to Billy Graham, and he was his father's, foreman, and he said, "Hey, look, Billy Graham, this guy's been here for about 4 weeks now. You should come to this camp meeting and hear about Jesus." And so people say, no, Albert McCain was the one that led him to Christ. However, if you dig a little bit deeper, all those things are just that outward fruit of some roots that were taking place deep in Billy Graham's life. He didn't hear the gospel for the very first time when he went to a revival meeting. That wasn't the first time. But actually, he spent years of his life, his family spent years of his life making sure that all of their children knew the gospel. They were devout Presbyterians. And basically, there's an interview by Billy Graham's sister, Jean, and she says, the Graham family was at church every time the doors were open. And prayer was a daily part of their lives. From the time Mother and Daddy were married, they had family devotions. They prayed together, read scripture together, and even on their honeymoon, knelt together. So throughout Billy's life, what was happening behind the closed doors were family devotions at night. And then his parents would take turns reading the Bible. Then all the family members would take turns praying. And they were actively involved in their church. And so we see that the faith development of Billy Graham that led to this profession of faith at the end happened through the faithfulness of his parents and his local church that kept the doors open, created a place for children to be in ministry, and they said, you know what? These kids need to know God's story. They need to see what it looks like. And so we see this partnership between families and the church, and the fruit of that was someone as great as like Billy Graham that came to know Christ. You see, if you look at today's scripture, the other part, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, it jumps right back to what we're talking about. A vision that the Israelites had lost by the time we get to Jesus' time. But when that whole chapter of Deuteronomy is dedicated to how to really fall in love with God. And it talks about knowing the commandments of God, and you see this beautiful text of how important it is for families to minister to their children. They said, talk about it when you're getting up. Talk about the scriptures when you're going down. When you are on the way to some place, you got to do this. In other words, church is not reserved for just the times that our families talk about Jesus. So I want to ask you a question, though. Those of you who have children in your life, where do the kids hear the gospel? Where do they encounter it? Wherever you are on that spectrum, brothers and sisters, we need to grow. In fact, Fortune 500 companies, I read about this marketing campaign that they were doing with Fortune 500 companies, okay? And about how they try to get people to be part of the tribe. In other words, follow a particular brand. Do you know what age they start targeting people to follow a particular brand? Guess what age? The Fortune 500 companies. This is like the standard industry practice for marketing. What age do they start getting people on the brand? 5. 8 is actually the common number. So their mission is to start putting their logo, their brand in front of a kid's face, so that way, by the time they are 8 years old, they're already part of the tribe. And understand, this is not this is not to sell Cocoa Puffs. What their strategy is that by the time the kid is loyal to a brand, by the time they're 8 years old, that 15 years later they'll be buying the product. Do you see how the world is working? So they're saying, if I can get this kid to be excited about Goodyear tires and start getting excited about race cars, and understand that Goodyear tires are part of this, that by the time that kid is able to drive, they're going to start buying Goodyear tires. That's how it worked. When you were a little kid, I'm talking to you men out there, what was your favorite brand of truck? Chevrolet? Come on, don't be shy, don't be ashamed, it's okay. Ford, Chevrolet, I mean, here's the thing, I mean, kids start choosing their brand early. I remember when I was in Georgia, I had a couple of families that were from Alabama, man, and I'll tell you what, that was like a nasty territory to get into because, there were people, you know what I'm talking about, so you had one people that liked Auburn, and you had other people that liked, University of Alabama, and those two, they said, man, we start picking our lines, drawing our lines in the playground. I'm telling you, church, if the Fortune 500 companies are onto this, they realize that the kids have to pick their tribe and identify early, maybe we as a church better start thinking about this in a more serious way. In fact, I think John Wesley was onto something. John Wesley made it a priority. Now, who's John Wesley? He's one of the founders of this Methodist movement, which we are an heir of, right? John Wesley, made children such a priority that he said that actually one of our ordination questions for every Methodist minister is, will you diligently instruct the children in every place? And we all say yes, but the reality is, man, if John Wesley was to measure how we do it, he would kick us out the door. He would excommunicate us. Because here's what the standard was. I mean, if you look at his large minutes, okay, I'm going to just paraphrase this. He would challenge every circuit rider, every preacher, when they come to a Methodist society, or it's a large gathering like this. He said that the preacher had to meet an hour each week with children as another congregation for groups of 10 or more children. 1 hour, the preacher said, man, I got to dedicate to teaching the children. 2, the preachers had to converse with the kids face to face. They had to actually not say, hi, God bless you, thank you for coming to the service like I do. They actually had to get into their lives and be known by the children. Then he instructed everyone in the Methodist Society to pray earnestly for the children. Church, when's the last time we have prayed earnestly for our children? For our children in our neighborhood, for the kids at Sable. I mean, come on, this is the coming to Jesus moment. And if you're getting some conviction, that means you are alive. And the Spirit of God is alive in you. And it's time for us to respond to this. Then he also said, number 4, instruct their parents and encourage them in their Christian lives. In other words, parents need help to come alongside of it. Then, I love this. If you don't have the gifts to minister to kids, man, we all have that. That's our category, right? I don't have the gift, I'm not led, and all that. You know what John Wesley said? Do it anyways. That's what he said. I don't care. In other words, there's no cop-out, there's no excuse, you have to do it. Then he said, if you don't have the gift, then you need to pray. This is number 6. Pray that you'll have the gift to relate to children and every opportunity where God puts them in your life. And then he told preachers to preach a minimum of once a year about the importance of ministry to children. This was the standard that John Wesley said that, hey, this is what our people of Methodist are called to do. And you know what? I think John Wesley is right. I think Fortune 500 is right. And church, Emmanuel, if you want to be right, you better get on board and say, hey, we've got to include ministry with children as part of our priorities. In fact, have you ever heard of the 414 window? Have you ever heard of that? 414 window is the term that missiologists use today. And what it was is it's not a geographical region like how they used to target unreached people groups before. But now the 414 window, this movement says that 85% of Americans will make some type of profession of faith in Jesus Christ between the ages of 4 and 14. And if they do not make some kind of meaningful commitment or have some kind of meaningful foundation, the percentage of them that actually come to Christ later on in age, I mean, it's like almost next to none. So what do the statistics tell us today? I just want to read some things to you that I think that are really important. This is a statistic that just came out by Barna Group and also a ministry called One Hope. One Hope is one that's a ministry that's dear to my heart, and I'm friends with the family leaders of there. But they came together with Barna, and they did just a study on guiding children. It just came out, I mean, like a week ago. And this is kids that are ages 6 to 12. So first of all, before a child reaches the age of 10, they are already heavily introduced in this information-driven society to a long list of very sensitive topics. And I'm talking about topics that are about gender, sexuality, suffering, beliefs, where is God in the midst of these things. Before the age of 10, kids are already introduced by this. You know where the majority of kids find out their information from at this age? YouTube. You know what YouTube is? YouTube is like this broadcast. I mean, kids from 6 to 10 are already getting all this information by YouTube. What's interesting is, though, that 59% of young Christians disconnect either for an extended period of time or permanently from church life after 15. We're losing 60% of young Christians by the age of 15. Now here's another thing that's interesting. This might be that, Pastor Mike, how's our church going to grow? Listen to this one. 58% of parents choose a church primarily based on the children's program. 58%, almost 60% of parents choose their church by what kind of children's program they offer. And then listen to this one. Though the preferred method may vary, 9 out of 10 parents want the church to talk with them and their children about sensitive topics. In other words, parents realize that their kids are facing issues that you and I never faced before, and they are actually, more than 90% are asking church, will you please help? And brothers and sisters, I really believe that this is the church's work. Rob Hoskins, who's the current president of One Hope, says about the church, we are to be the guardrails, helping the next generation navigate this knowledge-rich world and the struggles that come with growing up. There's so much place for the church today that we can come alongside families and kids that are struggling to try to find out what their identity is, what their purpose is, and we can be that loving, nurturing arms and say, you know what? We're here. Jesus loves you. Let's follow God together. Again, we as a church, there are some moments where we really shine. And in the 6 months that I've been here, where I've seen that we have shined in terms of ministry with children, with the way we responded to Angel Tree. We really did well in it. Golly, when William was born, and even to this day, he's like the Prince of Emmanuel. It's like, the church, you love our child. And whenever there's something like a specific need for kids, I see that this church responds. And then we're also involved in the children's ministry. But church, what can we do more to kind of grow in this area? That's what I'm asking you. Because you know what? We need to get a vision for this. We have people like Kim Osteen or Tara Sullivan that are working really hard week after week with our kids. But brothers and sisters, we all got to get behind this and support it. I had somebody come to me before the close of the year and gave a large sum of money when they saw the condition of our nursery. He said, the nursery hasn't been updated since 2000. And we're on that. But you know what? We have a lot of kids. And like I said, we have it from a 6-month-old to 18 years old and older. That's the spectrum that we have. We don't have a lot, but we have them. And you know what, church? And I'm saying this with all sincerity, and I pray that you will hear me. if we don't break the cycle now, if we don't break this wheel, we're going to go and we're going to go through another year. I've shared with our key leadership. I said, look, we have to do something different. And I think that this is one of the hardest challenges that we as Emmanuel are going to have to undergo together. Because all of you are okay with telling people about Jesus. You're all okay getting on board about, hey, let's beef up our discipleship. Hey, let's do mercy ministries. But this one's hard. Because I know you guys will say, look, we're old and I've done that before, or I don't know what to do, or how am I to connect with the kids? But church, we have to break the wheel. Do you hear me? We have to break the wheel. We have to break this cycle so that we can be the church of today, to welcome all people today, and be a church that will be here tomorrow. We have to do this. Here's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to pray about this. Put this on the top of your prayer list. Not only pray about this, but church, we got a plan together. So if anything that I'm saying resonates with you, I want to work with you. I want to serve with you so that we can make a difference in the kids' life. Church, okay, we've already made our 2020 budget. And so what I don't want you to do is divert all your pledges and everything you said to support the ongoing ministry of the church and put it down to children's ministry. No. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Those of you who have the means to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give some special gifts for children's ministry, for this youth ministry, so that we have some resources to work with. So maybe you can't physically participate, but you can support it in other ways. Church, we need to change. And in the meantime, we have to support what's already being done. We got to encourage people like Kim and Tara and others that come together and say, hey, you know what? Kids matter, and I know them, and I have a relationship with them. And what would happen if we at Emmanuel would have this vision, a larger vision for kids, that we can say, hey, this fall we're having confirmation, and we're going to take our group of kids to St. Simon's Island again, and we're going to be doing stuff with kids. I mean, church, we just got to give that vision. So I believe that the Spirit of God is moving and making us uncomfortable. At least it's making us uncomfortable because we're late in church. But here's the thing. Everything that has happened up to this moment, I really believe it's part of the Spirit of God. Amen. And church, this is our opportunity to say yes to Jesus. I am begging you to step up. Let's come together. And let's make a difference here in this church. And as we're thinking about this and praying about this, think about this table. This table symbolizes Jesus' love for us. And we don't put any barriers on this table. We say all are welcomed to come and receive the sacrament of Holy Communion. Church, I think we got to do a little bit more. I think we need to reflect our priority with children in every area of ministry. So when people come here, they can say, I can see the difference. So I'm asking you once more, will you take a big sledgehammer with me and break this wheel? Let us break the cycle. Let us pray. Lord, I know if I didn't take people off by what I said, Lord, I know I ticked them off by going too late. And so, Jesus, I just ask for special grace. Lord, thank you for all the ways that Emmanuel has been faithful in its ministry to children. Thank you that every time a challenge is coming or a need arises, that this church steps up in love to minister with kids. So now, Lord, I ask that you help us to not help kids win in episodes, but Lord, may it really be a part of the vision and DNA of our church. As we receive this sacrament of Holy Communion, God, may we remember that you broke down every barrier so that we can have a relationship with you. So show us, O Lord, where we need to tear down some barriers and open some doors.